Welcome back to the Building and Growing podcast. We're delighted to have Michael Watkins from Aurem with us. Michael, welcome.
Thanks, Lucas. Good to be back.
Yeah.
And good to be in New York as well.
That's right. Yeah, first podcast filmed in the US, and New York's a fantastic place to film it. We've got a great studio here.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Very good.
That's it. Look, Michael, the first time we did a podcast on Aurem, I think it was back end of 2023, just before you sort of moved out or right after you'd moved out to Abu Dhabi. So fast forward, we're nearly 2 years down the line. And I imagine you guys have made a lot of progress, which we'll dig into. But before we do that, do you want to introduce yourself and, sort of give us an overview of Aurem itself?
Yeah, sure. So it's 2022. So it's been 3 years now.
Oh, wow.
Which is even longer than we thought. But so Michael Watkins, CEO, co-founder of Aurem. Aurem is an operating system for retirement and wealth providers. So basically think, we take your data, we take your products and your processes and bring that into a single platform. That's who I am. That's what we do.
Fantastic, mate. And look, can you talk to us, I guess, how sort of the proposition of Aurem has, maybe evolved since that first podcast in 2022 to now?
Yeah, so we, I think initially we were under the impression that we would have to prove our technology before we could sell into enterprise clients. So we kind of took the approach that we would do a D2D2C, B2B2C proposition for ourselves to kind of prove that it would work, sell into enterprise corporations, and then flip to the pure kind of SaaS model. And as it kind of played out, we didn't have to do that piece. Our technology kind of speaks for itself. We could go direct to selling technology, and that's what we're doing now. So we just license our technology to large financial services institutions. We're working with the largest in the UAE and getting a ton of traction outside of that as well in other markets.
Fantastic. That's great. And so, you mentioned that I guess you're focusing on that sort of that technology piece there. Are you able to maybe talk us high level through some of the different problems that, your buyers might face in various markets?
Yeah, so I think there are probably a few different things that we solve for, but I kind of bucket into three. So first is that data typically exists in different systems because they're running maybe 3, 4, 5 different platforms for all of their data. Second is that their products, again, if they're running 3 or 4 or 5 different platforms, their products are split across different platforms, and therefore the experience is really disjointed. And then it's really hard to get kind of an overall view of like how processes and workflows work across those products and services. So they're kind of like the three main problems that we see, and that then expands into if you're a multinational corporation, you've got, you're providing retirement products in one market, maybe even several markets, and how do you have a consistent joined up experience across those? So they're kind of like the big problems that we solve for. We wanted to be a global platform from day one, so that's part of the reason why we built in the UAE. And that's kind of where we're getting lots of interest and traction because we're solving those big, costly problems for our customers.
Fantastic, that's great. And can you talk to us, I guess, about that journey of setting up in the UAE and the initial traction that you got there?
Yeah, so obviously it was a new market or relatively new market. I had some exposure to it before, but it was. Again, like part of the reason why I moved out of it is the regulation there is very dynamic. Things happen quickly. Change happens quickly. So there was kind of an initial period of finding feet, making sure that we had the right talent around us. That was kind of probably more challenging because you just, you don't have the same networks. But once we kind of created the foundations, it's been pretty smooth from there out. We have like fantastic people that work there. Half of our team are in the UAE, half of the team are outside. It's been a happy journey so far, I would say.
Fantastic, that's great. And look, we find ourselves here in New York today. What's brought you over here?
Yes, I mean, for us, like I said, our platform is global from day one. The retirement market globally is absolutely huge. $65 trillion of assets and billions being spent every year on maintaining kind of legacy technology. The US is a huge market, and I think probably will be the most important market for us. So we are over here for a couple of different reasons. So we're speaking to prospective customers, partners, and we also have a conference here as well next week. We're, like I said, we see this as a very important market for us. So we want to be here, we want to be present, and really solve some of the big problems that are faced in the US retirement market.
That's great. And I guess, you and I met in the British sort of retirement market space. For those in the audience who, might be more familiar with, say, the British market or UAE market, do you think you could talk us through sort of some of the differences of, what happens in the US market?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, for those who are familiar with the UK, auto enrollment is now very prevalent. So basically what that means is that people are automatically signed up to some form of retirement or pension saving. The US is very different in the sense that it's kind of employer-led. So there's no kind of mandating, or there hasn't been any mandating until recently. So you kind of have this kind of multiple different product type where some individuals have no coverage whatsoever. Some have some coverage. They've recently now obviously been the Secure 2.0 Act, which has brought in a kind of an auto enrollment style system with pooled employer plans. So we're kind of seeing same problems and different problems faced in the market, which is works quite well for us.
What is your typical client?
Yeah, so our typical clients are banks, asset managers, pension providers, and how we typically work with them. The nature of our product means that we can prove value within the first day to week. So essentially what we do is we kind of understand what their problem is. We have a kind of host a workshop or series of workshops to kind of get to the root of what they're trying to solve for. We configure our platform for that problem. And then essentially what we do from there is kind of take them from that day through to release. And that can be anywhere from, 2, 3, 4 weeks up to a few months, depending on the level of complexity and obviously the regulatory risk, compliance risk that they need to get signed off.
You've mentioned, I guess, the speed that you're able to help them launch solutions and products. How does that compare to, say, a typical route to market currently?
Yeah, so I mean, globally, our competitors typically are anywhere from 10 to 30-year-old technology platforms. And I don't think there are many examples of 10 to 30-year-old technology platforms that are able to move quickly. So, if you're going from 0 to implementation, it will take anywhere from 9 to 18 months, sometimes more, for our competitors to get something off the ground. Whereas, like I said, for us, we can do an implementation in as little as a day. Obviously, in reality, there's like I said, all of the compliance, legal, and all of those things. But for our part of the deliverable, it could be as soon as a day. But more pragmatically, it's probably in the 4 to 8 weeks because there are various pieces that need to be tested, refined, and everything from the business side.
Indeed, yeah. And look, I mean, that's a significant amount of time saving, and I imagine budget saving as well. Delivering something in 4 to 8 weeks as opposed to 9 to 18 months. So can we, I guess, dive a level deeper into that as to how you're able to help those clients achieve, such a huge reduction in their time to market?
Yeah, so we built around this problem that there's a heavy involvement from engineers to write the code, build the technology, typically for any implementation. The platforms are rigid, so typically they're built for one thing, and they're being asked to do multiple things. They need to be heavily customized. So we basically build a platform that is highly configurable. So we have these basic concepts around money comes in, something needs to happen to that money, and then money goes out. But outside of that, we built for multi-language, multi-currency, all of the comms to be configurable, all of the copy and content to be configurable. And then of late, we've built something really cool, which is an AI workflow product builder, which essentially allows us to take any product rules, input them into an LLM, and then outspits the kind of the code that needs to run in the background to kind of calculate how that product should work. So all of these factors mean that we're prepared for the use cases that we know our customers want to see, and just massively increases the rate of execution. The other important thing I think to mention is, It also means that they aren't relying on engineering resource, and they can also extend their own proposition themselves. Once they feel comfortable with the platform, they can continue to build IP like within the platform without having to build on the side or on top of.
Yes, fantastic. And look, I mean, I guess just tying back to kind of the first podcast we did in 2022 to now, you're talking about the fact that, you're going to be able to offer the sort of AI workflows in order to reduce that time to market. How has technology changed over those past 3 years to facilitate this product and new proposition?
Yeah, so we launched Aurem in September 2022, and I think it was November 2022 when ChatGPT 3.5 was launched.
Mm-hmm.
So we've kind of like run in parallel to all of the AI developments that have been happening, which is like from a timing perspective for us is perfect.
Yeah.
We have been very deliberate in not jumping straight into a solution and thinking like thoughtfully about what problems do we need to solve and how do we apply this in a way that manages risk, in a way that manages kind of a changing environment in the AI landscape, because you've seen a number of startups come and go because OpenAI have kind of eaten them through development. And we've really kind of like focused on the specialism that we operate within and solving a couple of use cases. So I mean, technology has changed hugely. We were talking the other night. I don't think it's transformational today, but it's not transformational as it will be in the coming years as it evolves.
Indeed. And, what sort of level of co-creation have you had with, I guess the sort of banks and pension providers that, you're working with, providing this solution to?
Yeah, so by way of background, I mean, I've been in this industry for over 20 years now, have a firm understanding from like working in kind of almost feels like every role within the industry. So like collectively as a group of people who have also like shared some of my experiences, we're very opinionated about like what the problems are and how to solve them. Because the tendency is to, people get quite complacent about this is how things are and this is how they will always be. So we obviously, obviously we have collaborated and co-built with partners that we're working with in terms of like what the solutions need to look like for them. But we are, I would say, 90 to 95% just opinionated in how we believe these things should be executed so that they're future-proof for the future.
That's great. And, I guess when it comes to the adoption of AI, I think, initially it was quite consumer-driven. As, you mentioned, ChatGPT kind of took off at the end of 2022. How are you seeing financial service providers adopt AI into, I guess, some of their key infrastructure?
I think there's probably two parties in financial services. So there are those who have formed partnerships with the general purpose model providers and are actively working with them to kind of utilize it in their back office functions and some of their front office pieces as well. Like a few examples I can think of are like I saw Citibank in the last week announcing they built like AI advisor tools. So I think they're going a bit deeper. They've spent a lot of time and money on their data infrastructure. And then you have others who are kind of more, I would say, passive consumers. So they want to be involved in the hype, but they don't either have the infrastructure or knowledge in terms of like how to implement it successfully and meaningfully. And they kind of have just bolted on, like chat interfaces or whatever. Something that's not particularly scalable. So I think there's a general interest, but the problem that you have with financial services generally is like there's a ton of risk involved, right? Like you need to get it right. You can't afford to not get it right. Because if you do, like that's going to be a big fuck up for that company. Indeed.
And, how do you see CTOs kind of approaching that, risk versus reward?
Yeah, I think, I mean, naturally, and I wouldn't put everyone in this bucket, but CTOs typically are quite experimental, again, depending on the person and the organization. So I think there is a desire, but like I said, I think the rate limiting factor for most financial services organizations is just they don't have the infrastructure to be able to achieve the things that they want to achieve. And it comes in amongst like, a bunch of other burning problems they have, right? So I think today, for most companies, AI is still seen as a novelty because people can't think of like, solid applications that they can apply it to that isn't just a novel thing. But that's probably just call it confirmation bias or experience lock-in, where they've just had like a one-dimensional thinking for the past 20 years, and therefore like it's really hard to be like innovative with how you apply new technologies.
Indeed. And when I guess say the infrastructure piece starts to be solved, do you think there are any other key challenges that they're facing when it comes to adopting AI?
I think two things probably. So one would be like data protection. Data is always obviously a subject that gets a lot of attention. So that is definitely one. And then I've completely forgotten what the other thing was that I was going to say. Come back to me. I'll remember it in a minute.
Yeah. No, that sounds good. And I guess we've spoken a fair bit about the US market here and the opportunities that there are here. Are there any other markets that you've been looking at recently for expansion?
Like honestly, like we're here to win. Like we want to be the number one technology provider in the retirement and wealth space globally. So I mean, we're actively in conversations in 13 countries. And I think it's only a matter of time before we kind of have impact in those companies. Like we're a small but growing team, and we're definitely not trying to bite off more than we can chew. So we're trying to be like hyper focused in which markets we go into first, until we're at kind of sufficient scale to be able to run multiple markets at once. But I do think that one of the efficiencies that we have as an organization is our technology actually stands up. So there's not like a heavy reliance on having tons of people for implementation. There's not a heavy reliance on tons of people for sales, delivery, because the technology is designed to be implemented quickly and realize value. So we're very fortunate in that regard, but our focus at the moment is continue to do an excellent job for our customers in the UAE, and the US is the next market for us.
Fantastic, that's great. And you mentioned, I guess, team size. When we did the first podcast, you'd closed an investment round back then. Do you have any sort of funding plans for the near future?
Yeah, so we raised one round since then. So we closed that in last December. So that was awesome to bring on another institutional investor. We raised $3 million. Another advantage of our business model is that we're incredibly capital efficient. We don't need to raise huge sums of money to be able to kind of capture value. We will be raising another one, so we'll actually be kicking that off in a couple of weeks when I'm back from the US. We have an incredible list of investors interested, and our current investors also looking to double down. So that's puts us in a really good position. And really now it's about kind of like three areas for us, which are, we always want to go faster because we're like very clear on what it is that we're delivering, what our future looks like. We want to continue delivering excellent service for our customers because we built that reputation today, and we want to make sure that maintains into new customers, but also making sure that we can maintain it for our current customers. And then the final area of focus for us is like actually having boots on the ground, like being present in the markets that we want to go into, because building relationships is incredibly important. And whilst, yes, we can do that remotely and all of those things, like you need to live, feel, and breathe your customer's pain to like fully understand it.
Indeed. And look, I mean, the fundraising environment back in 2022 was, not great. I guess it's improved slightly over time, but AI has been a really key sort of factor in terms of unlocking investment recently. I guess the type of institutional investors that you're raising from may not have had as much, say, AI exposure compared to some of the other sort of VC style investors. How are you seeing, I guess, their thoughts and appetite for it change?
Yeah, I think, it's kind of well documented that there's a ton of money going into AI at the moment, and lots of people comparing it to kind of the dot-com bubble. Personally, I believe that, there undoubtedly is a bubble, because I think, there isn't enough focus on like long-term value. I think that's probably the thing that you're seeing, but like naturally you have to take bets. As I said, we were like very conscious about how we embed AI into our solution to make sure that it was embedded first and foremost and not just like a novel feature.
Yeah.
But we are a technology company, and I think one of the things that people should understand is that, just like the internet is and was a technology, AI is exactly the same thing. So you should focus less on the tool, and you should focus on the problem and the outcome.
Yep.
So we see it being critical to our technology stack for the foreseeable future. But we're not just waving an AI flag because we're like, okay, if we say AI, then we get another 10 million in funding. Like there's no value really in that.
Yeah.
So yeah, summary: lots of money going into AI, but only a few of those bets will actually bear any fruit.
Indeed, and I think it's a really good sort of opportunity to dive a level deeper in terms of the impact that AI has had in terms of what type of products you're able to offer.
Yeah.
So, I guess, do you think that it's led to you guys being able to offer a much sort of broader and more thorough, say, solution? I don't want to ask a yes or no question, so I think it's better for me to say, how has that impacted your product offering?
Yeah, so our plan has never changed, but like I said, and this is why I think about AI as just being another tool in the toolbox. But our ability to execute on that faster has definitely been, enabled by AI. So we always our plan was always to build a global platform. Our plan was always to build a multi-product platform, and we built the infrastructure to enable that. And now the part that we can kind of create the most value with is, by leveraging LLMs to handle the product rule engine. So you don't need an engineer to write the code for every single product. And if you think like, there are many, many products just in the vertical that we operate in. There are many different product rules, regulations, depending on country to country. So handling that via large language models is it's fundamentally game changing. It's a huge value.
Yeah.
It means that we as a technology provider can go faster. It means that our customers can go faster. It means that it's more robust, more visible, and there's less dependency on, like I said, engineers, technology. So the cost to serve comes down significantly, and both from our perspective in terms of the headcount that we need to build these solutions out, and then that being passed on to not only kind of our customers but their customers as well.
Yeah.
So it's huge value, huge unlock.
Indeed, and you've mentioned sort of retirement as a vertical a few times. Are there any other verticals that you'd like to apply, I guess, that same methodology to?
The short answer is yes, I would like to eat the whole world. The longer answer is we're very focused on what we're doing now. So retirement is our kind of primary focus. A secondary focus, because it directly relates to retirement, is like the broader wealth proposition.
Yeah.
And we're already kind of building out products in that space, but as a supplement to kind of retirement pensions, workplace savings. But by definition, like what we've built can be taken in like many different directions. It is elastic. It can be, because the concepts are similar across financial services. Typically, money needs to come in, something needs to happen to it, and then the money needs to go somewhere else. So if you take that basic premise and you have enough elasticity in your product, then there's kind of no limit in terms of what you can do.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great. And I guess, a question in terms of go-to-market, because, I guess a lot of people are, seeing these things on LinkedIn, which are all about, high volume sort of cold calls, cold emails, death of, cold marketing. You, I guess as a business, are not looking to sort of reach out to, tens of thousands of SMEs, like, a lot of tech companies are. There's a very, I guess, well-established pool of companies that you're establishing relationships with. How or sort of what does that go-to-market process look like for you?
Yeah, so I had this conversation earlier today, interestingly. So up until now, everything that we've been doing is kind of product-led growth. So we have a product, it solves a clear problem, and then because it solves a clear problem in a kind of an excellent way, we then get referrals to other clients.
Yeah,
and that's how we've acquired our first 6 clients through word of mouth and reputation. But taking that internationally is a very different sales motion. So for us now, it's about complementing product-led growth with sales-led growth. And I don't think they're mutually exclusive, just to be clear. So we're not just going to hire a bunch of salespeople who take, an order from the customer and then bring it back and say, "Can you build this?" Because our product solves the problems that they have. So we've borrowed methodology from Palantir. I think everybody in the world now knows who Palantir are, but we've kind of been banging this drum for a long time. We believe in kind of working hand in glove with our customers. So we have kind of a forward deployed engineer model. We have deployment strategists, so people, again, who work clearly to not just understand the problems, but to articulate the solution to the problem to maximize the value. And I think that, again, like this is something that a lot of people misunderstand around like how that role works, is it's not about, like I said, order taking. It's about actually affirming the value that's being created by the solution. And doing that in a meaningful way. So we won't just, if somebody wants something that's like 50% different from what we have, we'll say no. Like we're comfortable with saying no because we believe that the way that we build things is the right way.
That's great. And, I haven't heard that term of kind of deployment strategist before, but certainly it makes sense in terms of, really affirming the value. And there's, I guess there's that saying that, you shouldn't win work just for the sake of kind of delivering it or, doing it in a way which, you don't think is the right way, because ultimately it comes back to your reputation afterwards. So
yeah, I mean, like to use a weird analogy, but like if you think about your iPhone, for example, you buy an iPhone because it does like a few shiny things that you like, but mainly it's, I pick up the phone, I'll call, I'll message, whatever, and scroll social media. But there's a ton of like rich value that exists within that product, which you may never find. So like their job is to basically make sure all of that rich value is unlocked. And that the experience is cohesive. And that's like we call our platform an operating system for that reason. Because it isn't just about doing some very like low value parts of the value chain or workflows. It's about how do you connect the whole experience and allow them to build products, services, on top of that. And do it in a joined up way. Access, if you think about like iOS, right? Like your whole life lives inside of your Apple ID, all of your data is there. You have your applications that sit on top. And the fact that you can join all of those pieces together with like, log in with Apple or, simple features like being able to copy from your iPhone and paste it onto your laptop.
That's so useful.
It's like the most useful thing. I use it like 20 times a day. But the fact that you have like this connected ecosystem that you can build on top of, build your use cases on top of, like that's what we're replicating in kind of retirement and wealth spaces. Like it isn't just about single point solution. It's about an ecosystem or an operating system that can be used for multiple things.
Fantastic. And look, I guess, like when we met, the sort of the fintech ecosystem in London was growing. I joined Revolut. I know that, we've just walked past Monzo's office over here. Wise has kind of, I think is going to delist in the London Stock Exchange and list over here in New York. So we've seen, a consolidation, I guess, of the fintech ecosystem. But where do you see that going next?
I think it's really interesting, right? Because you've got this kind of, I don't think the US is thinking about Europe, but Europe is always thinking about the US. And I think what you have seen is kind of a manifestation of like decades worth of like embedded social conventions and norms. The US is just more like risk on. They're more able as a society to say, we think we can do this, and therefore we are going to do this. Whereas in Europe, like I think that's probably not so much the case. There's kind of, I don't know whether it's like shaming of like, too afraid to fail because like somebody will say something bad. But yeah, I mean, you kind of, AI has almost like given some kind of level of resurgence to the European ecosystem from a startup perspective. But I think ultimately the reason why the goal is always to, like the gold standard is kind of cracking the US is because it's obviously, the largest market in the world. but you're really running with the big boys if you can be successful in the US. So I think it'll be an interesting time for the European ecosystem. There's tons of capital there. There's tons of opportunity, but it's quite disaggregated in terms of a market. I mean, again, I'm going down a rabbit hole now, but like the UK leaving the EU not really operating as like a single economy. That's kind of a limiting factor. I think if you had a few of these things where like the EU is more of like a single economy, then you end up in a situation where it kind of rivals the US from a market size perspective. But I think Europe is just a very, very difficult place to build. You've got all of the right components, but just a few key elements missing.
Yeah, gotcha. And I guess Aurem aside, what would you say excites you the most when it comes to AI in fintech?
I think it's everything that we don't know today. Like, I think, like again, like we were kind of talking about this the other night. I think the broader, we exist on kind of an adoption curve. This is like a well-known fact. We're still very early on in that adoption curve, and it's really about how you like fully integrate through that adoption curve, like AI. And I think when we get to kind of the last third or fourth or the last quarter, that's where it will start to become really interesting, because once you have like main stage adoption, jobs will get replaced, and there will be probably seismic shifts in like how the technology evolves from that point. I think I'm just really interested to see kind of the specific use cases that drive the most amount of value, specifically in the financial services, because that's my world. But more broadly in like sciences, health, for example, and physics, because like that's where kind of the global societal shift will happen. Like financial services is obviously fantastic, but saving people's lives and discovering new science, new physics or whatever is like that's fundamental.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, you think about, I guess, certainly I wear a wearable, and it tracks all my health, well, I guess some health data in real time. What will happen when there's, chips, for example, that are going into people, and you've got, real-time data being fed into LLMs. How much are we going to learn about people and, preventing, like the prevention of diseases? Because I think AI helps with diagnosis. Hopefully it's going to help with treatment and prevention as well.
Yeah, so I had an interview today, and a really interesting guy that I was speaking to, we were talking about. So we both have this thing where, like if we want to keep notes, there's no format or that kind of works for either of us. Like the way that my brain works is don't really know how to. It's kind of like an ugly puzzle where like the shape and size of things needs to be in a specific order, but it's like very specific to me. And he was talking about broadly like how to solve that problem. And my belief is, like the mediums in which this information is kind of recorded, like the interface is more important to solve before you solve the platform. And by that I mean, today we're heavily dependent on phones. But we have another number of other devices, like you said, wearables. You have headphones. I've got Meta glasses. I think there is no single solution, as in there's no silver bullet where it's just like one device that solves all of these things. I think it's like all of those devices seamlessly being connected, which is, I guess, why I'm probably most disappointed in Apple's AI strategy or like execution to date. But I think this will apply like across all sectors. Once you have like a really joined up ecosystem across like the AI space, then you can kind of unlock a ton of value in terms of sentiment analysis, memory, like you said, health data, all of these things that are kind of interdependent, but like you maybe don't realize that today. Just having a global view of like how you navigate the world and what you need, like that's where the real value will be unlocked.
Yes, indeed. That's fantastic. Michael, we've covered a great deal today. So I actually have a kind of a bonus question for you before I ask my closing one. But we talked about employee count and building efficient teams. Now, in the past, during like the previous sort of startup funding years, let's say, employee headcount and funds raised were like two big metrics, whereas now it's becoming increasingly clear that you can have a very small number of employees and a very, very high revenue business thanks to AI. What do you think the next metric is going to be?
Yeah, it's a good question because it's kind of like inversely correlated. What kind of has, but hasn't, because I think it's more of like a badge of honor, right? Like if you can hit $1 billion with one person, which is kind of like the kind of the who is going to do that. I think from a metrics perspective, like it always has to come down to value, right? Like, and I think the trick that's being missed in this kind of AI frenzy today is, will that value be there in 5 years? Will it be there in 10 years? So these companies are hitting like 100 million ARR in 8 months. Yeah. Is it still 100 million in 10 years? Or is it actually now 5, or they no longer exist? Like I said, you have these innovators, if you go through the adoption curve, then naturally, there's always going to be like people who are like, give me this new product. Yeah. And the AI landscape, like it's an echo chamber, right? Like in this space, in the startup space, it's an echo chamber because we are innovators by definition. You have to be if you want to, create a new company. Yes. But so this is a really long way of me saying that I think the value, the metrics are the same. I think they just maybe get tapered down slightly. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah.
And I guess going back to my original question, then, is there anything else that you want to sort of add?
No, look, I think like my ambition, our ambition as a company is very clear. The problem that we're solving is a very big and important one that gets like massively overlooked. I think it's probably worth, noting, there aren't a ton of startups in the retirement space. This is kind of like once every 5 years, 10 years, you get a new one, versus like payments where it's like every 10 minutes. It's probably, it's probably for the length of this interview, there's probably 10 new payment startups. So yeah, I think we're very committed to what we're doing. We're solving a very big problem, and we will solve that problem and continue to solve that problem.
That's awesome. And one final question, just because of I guess the success that you've had in your career, and I guess as I know you as a person as well. Are there any final takeaways you'd want to share with the audience?
Oh, that's a good question. Family makes you focus. Yep. There you go. That's my soundbite. Family makes you focus.
Perfect. Michael, thanks so much. And we're looking forward to watching Aurem continue to grow.
Thanks for having me, Lucas.
You're most welcome.